Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Testing.
We'll start at 3:15, so we're good. So welcome. Hopefully everybody's in the right room. This is the mental health something, whatever Elvin called it panel. This is the mental health panel. I've done a few of these. I think some of the people up here have probably been to them or done some. So I'm going to do this the easiest possible way. I'm going to have everybody introduce themselves. So whatever they want to be called, cosplay name, real name, whatever. So I'll start. I'm the Kurt Rose of Nerdbot. If you see Nerdbot stuff, I'm always around. And then I'm going to go, hopefully everybody will follow. I'm going to give one fun fact about me. I grew up in Ohio, and I moved to California after grad school, and I have not looked back.
Hey, I'm Amber. You can find me on Instagram under Puma Does Cosplay, rar. And my fun fact, let's see. My fun fact is I'm very attracted to Jeff Goldblum and Matt Dunford, and they're actually the same person today, so that's my fun fact.
Hi, my name is Rui. I go by Geek Strong on the interwebs. Fun fact, I don't know. I used to resurface the ice at the ice rink over there. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
There you go. Who can say that in here? Who else in here can say that?
I'm Michelle Lavelle. You can find me on Instagram, Michelle Lavelle. Super easy. Fun fact about me, I guess, I work at a sex shop.
Yeah. Yeah. Look. Hey, we're gonna go find out where she's at.
Yes, the Pleasure Chest in West Hollywood.
Ooh,
Yeah, even better.
I'm familiar. So I guess the best way to start the mental health panel is usually for everybody to give like a quick, like 2-minute summary, if they're comfortable, with their general mental health issues that they've been dealing with. Like you can either say something as simple as depressed, or you can go into a little story about what the issues are, why it's important to you. So I'm going to start with Michelle Lavelle. Let's start with our sex shop expert.
Yeah.
Oh, hi, hello, greetings. Wow, okay, so I'll say, so there was a lot of things mental health issues that I've kind of dealt with my whole life that were unidentified for a very long time. I'm also a survivor of sexual assault. And so that's something that definitely dealing with that trauma and being triggered by seeing the person that did it pop up on, Facebook and friends feeds and things like that is definitely an issue. Also being an empath and having dealt with 2 malignant narcissistic partners in the past and dealing with, abuse and things like that. And along the way, most recently, discovering that I'm autistic, which is something that many people don't realize, though, that autism presents itself atypically, surprise, in femme folks because of the way that we're socialized and the way that, we just have different, chemical makeups. And so kind of coming to terms with what all of that means for me as a human being, as a person, as a woman, as a queer POC person, and realizing how little information there is about femme folks and autism, because the majority of studies that are done about it are done predominantly on cis-het men, and the majority of people, when you say autistic, they think of like Rain Man is like kind of the instant go-to for a lot of people. So a lot of times when I will mention that I'm autistic, people will be like, oh my God, you must be like so high functioning. Like, I can't even tell. And it just shows me how ignorant people are to, what a spectrum it really is, and how for many femme folk, it takes us into our 30s to get diagnosed, or for even a therapist to acknowledge that it's a potential thing. And so my whole life I've dealt with anxiety, I've dealt with OCD, and I've dealt with depression, which I like to say they're all really good friends that play in the sandbox of my mind together. And I never knew why that was. And my therapist that I have currently was the one that he showed me brain scans of people and showed how when you overlap people who have who are on the spectrum, with people who have anxiety, OCD, and depression, all the same parts of the brain light up. There's a major intersectionality there. And that was definitely a major kind of learning curve for me. And what does that mean for me in terms of like, I was like, oh my God, how am I ever gonna be a successful human being like with this thing now? But then realizing that, you know, everybody is kind of a little bit on the spectrum, and I like to say I have autistic superpowers. So learning to find the strengths within that, learning to find the advantages within that, and then just learning self-mastery of the challenges that come with it, and having a really great support system in my partner. That's kind of helped me navigate and get through all the things.
Hello, I'm new to this. I'm improvising, since I've never really done this. In terms of like explaining my path to where I've gotten to do mental health advocacy in this community. And for me, it was a long path. It started basically dating somebody who was bipolar when I was 21. But it started just before that, and then my eldest brother, who was my hero, was a addict. And he took his, I always try to remember the proper way to say this, because it isn't committed suicide. There's a disease, you know, it's attacking them. And he succumbed to it, his addiction and suicide. And then I put all my love into this girl, and she was bipolar, and I didn't know anything about mental health, didn't know anything about any of this stuff. Family was very religious. I didn't really do much other than just hope that things would get better, and I would sprinkle some magic and love, and things would work out between us. Unfortunately, up and down a lot, and then eventually we broke up, and she took her life. Didn't take again, succumbed to it. And that kind of set me on a path of discovery with myself, and changed me a lot to kind of figure out what I wanted to do. And then Instagram happened. And that opened up a door of a community in this wonderful community of geeks. And I started to talk about physical health, and just organically started to talk about mental health. And that led me to this point. I actually met him pretty early on when I started doing this. I think I got on Instagram about 2014. And in doing that, I along that same path, I educated myself as much as possible with becoming an EMT, doing paramedic stuff at UCLA, neurophysiology for about a year. That's just a fancy way of saying that I put that giant thing that you see, like Professor X type thing, on people's heads, and watch the waves go by. Neurophysiologist.
Yeah, that 5 times really fast.
Right. I think it's the longest word in the, no, that's electromagnetic, yeah. Off topic here. So, as you can tell, ADHD, yes. Anxiety, those are my superpowers. They perfectly said that's exactly how I look at them. They help me a lot with photography, videography. They help me hyperfocus a lot. I use them to my advantage, and I've learned through coping mechanisms, defense mechanisms, and all the education that I've done to make them superpowers. And they very much are, and sometimes it gets the better of me, but because I have a lot of habits that I've established in my life that have helped me, I really do feel like they are superpowers. And that's where I'm at now, where I'm advocating for it. I'm not a mental health professional, but I do feel very confident in a lot of the tools and things that I've learned to help me get to this point where I'm at. And I feel very confident when I share and talk about it in this community. And I'm grateful that I'm here.
So I'm a hot mess express right here. I grew up with a single mom. My dad was a crackhead. He was in prison my whole life. Never really saw much of him. So I have daddy issues, abandonment issues, all that. We all do, yes, right? I didn't get diagnosed with ADHD until about 2 years ago. So I went through school having a lot of issues with focusing, getting in trouble for talking, blurting out, not being able to sit still. So that was kind of cool, finding out that I actually did have something wrong with me, and I wasn't just like, just making it up in my head like my mom said. My mom had a thing where she was like, oh, well, mental health is like a white people thing. Like, she didn't believe that everybody has the possibility to have some type of mental health issue, so that was a big issue in growing up because she just said I was making everything up or just being ridiculous or overreacting. So it's kind of interesting now. I try to keep a relationship like that with my kids, explaining to them situations and stuff at an early age so they know how to identify and try to help friends at school that might have similar issues. So I have anxiety, I have ADHD, I was diagnosed with major depression, and I don't take any meds for it right now, and my way to cope right now is doing cosplay. But as you know, it's very time consuming to come up with your costumes and plan stuff out, and it gives you something to look forward to. You get to meet a lot of really cool people, got to meet Kurt, and got to, all the people you see on Instagram, it's so funny, you get to like meet them in person, and you're just like, oh my god, like I follow you. So yeah, there's always definitely different ways to cope with things, and hopefully you feel safe, you feel like you have friends that you can always contact when you're having a really bad moment. Like I have this girl, the Lady Joker back there, that's my day one, known her for like my entire life, and she's helped me, she's helped me through a lot of hard times, but yeah, so I have a lot of things wrong, and you just kind of have to like realize that things are gonna get better one day. You can't just harp on things, and I pretty much cope with humor. So yeah, if you guys ever want to find me, Puma Does Cosplay. I try to post some funny stuff and weird random stuff to kind of make fun of my anxiety or my ADHD and stuff like that, because that's kind of the best way is to just laugh, find a way to enjoy your life. And I was really random because I have ADHD. There was no point for that at all.
So, going off of what everybody else said here, so I'm a straight white guy that's successful, so everything's great for me.
Boo! White privilege. Ohio.
Congratulations. Good for you.
So what's your problem? So what?
Yeah, so I have had ups and downs, I guess I like to say I'm like the poster boy for the person who, people say, well, you shouldn't have an issue. I grew up in a loving family for the most part. Yeah, I grew up in the Midwest, saw snow. Went to college, went to grad school, but things were not, just like everybody else, things are not always exactly on the surface what they are internally, or sometimes even what people see from the outside is different. I grew up single mother. We grew up basically dirt poor when I was a little kid, and I had to work, and luckily, my family was there to help me. But basically around 16 is when I look back and I see what the problems were starting. But in my 20s and early 30s, I went through attempted suicides, ups and downs. Some days I had great days, some days I didn't have great days. Almost didn't make it through grad school because of some of my mental health issues, but I did, which is awesome. I'm pretty proud of myself for that. But yeah, my issues are a little different in the sense that I think a lot of it's literally there's something wrong internally with me. So I'm on medication, and it definitely helps. And I go to therapy, and that helps too. And hey, here's Christabel. Just jumping in on the end.
You made it.
And a lot of stuff that are my issues are more internal than necessarily external. But like everybody else here too, I think a lot of my problems stem from emotions related to internalizing stuff that you shouldn't really internalize, and feeling for other people's issues too. As other people suffer, people suffer too. So I've attempted suicide. I'm on medication. I'm here now. I'm running these mental health panels, and hopefully people will come away with something positive from being here. And apparently we have one other person that just kind of randomly showed up here.
I have an excuse for being late. I was hanging out with speedsters. They are late to everything. Like I was in the Reverse Flash Origins.
Oh, you scared me. Okay, I was like, wait.
Fake news. Before we go on to, I want to open the floor to questions and comments and stuff. But before we do that, I'm going to introduce you.
Am I spilling the beans right now?
No, this is Christabel. This is Vegan Spider-Man. This is the famous.
I'm alright.
So do you want to give us like a quick 2
Cliff
minutes?
notes?
Cliff notes. 2 minutes of why you're on this panel.
Alright, so I was born November 25th, 1988 in the hospice place. You guys know. Okay, so my general history with the whole mental health thing with me, I grew up in an abusive household. rough scenario right there to begin with, and just throughout school I was overweight, being bullied constantly, that sort of thing, and it takes its toll on you over time, over the years. And I know, looking back at it, around high school was when I realized I was bipolar, but I never got a proper diagnosis for it. It went back and forth. Doctors would see me and I'd be really anxious, so they thought it was anxiety. Doctors would see me, I'd be really depressed, they thought it was depression. And then it wasn't until 2 years ago when I finally went to a doctor. I was like, hey, I'm having constant ups and downs. My life is really unstable. My lows are ridiculously low. My highs are really high. What's going on? And I found out I was bipolar, proper diagnosis, and it's been a year now since I've been on medication. And it's an up and down battle. I have days right now, it's getting better, where like weeks on end I'll feel really good, then manic episodes might creep in, that sort of thing. But my biggest thing that's been supportive, being a part of this community, surrounding myself with the right people, and taking my meds, which was really hard to accept at one point in time, because I know there's lots of stigma behind it, there's lots of fear, people are worried taking the wrong things and possibly making them worse, feeling worse, that sort of thing. And I'm here to tell you it's not like that. It takes time, you'll find the right thing, you'll feel great, and that's pretty much been my process. It's still an ongoing battle. I'm 29 too, so it took me until 27 to really be on top of it. So it's never too late to really take care of your mental health.
So I guess I'll kind of go ahead and open up the floor. You know, we'll have any questions. Wants to talk about a couple of the hot button issues. I guess one of the things I definitely wanted to talk about today is gaslighting, because that's come up a few times in the community. And for those of you who don't know, gaslighting is essentially convincing somebody that what they know is true is not true. It's come up a lot in politics, where if you just say like, no, you're wrong enough, maybe the people start thinking they're wrong. And that leads to a lot of mental health issues, especially in abusive relationships. So that's something I definitely want to bring up. And addiction was the other thing, you know, that's come up recently in the news that we want to talk a little bit about. And I think you can speak maybe a little bit more on addiction, but those are kind of the two main key points I'm hoping we can have a little discussion about. But if anybody wants to bring anything to the table, ask us questions, or nope.
No questions.
Still waiting? Okay, well then I'll just keep going. So well, let's talk about one of the things I think that's a big issue with people that have mental health issues is how you are willing to admit to yourself that you need assistance with yourself. And like Amber said, you know, I grew up in the Midwest, and nobody in my family, as far as I know, has any mental health issues. It was very like, you know, you eat meat and potatoes, you go to work, everything's fine, you get married, you die. That's, you know, and if you're like, hey, you know, I'm having issues, I want to kill myself, I don't see the world the same way, they go, well, you know, I don't go to church or something. And that stuff, you know, doesn't help everybody. It helps some people, but it doesn't help everybody. A lot of us, you have to come to terms, and for me, I was in graduate school. I had my ups and downs, and then in graduate school, I was in a parking lot, basically ready to kill myself. And I was like, I'm gonna kill myself, this is it. Like, and I'm sitting in a parking lot in my car, and I'm going, this isn't normal. Like, you know, I'm a smart guy, I read, you know, going back to like, I'm a total lit nerd, like Hamlet, you know, he questioned his own mortality too. And I had that moment where it's like, well, I have to get help. And when I sat down, I talked to my mom, who, you know, knows nothing about this stuff. She's like, I understand. Let's go to the doctor, let's get help, let's talk about this, let's get you on medication. That's the thing that started my path, but as I said, that was not the first time I thought about or attempted suicide. So it's been ups and downs, and now I'm hopefully on an up that will keep going up, because I have a lot of positive people around me, everything's going great, but it's that first moment when you have to say, I need help, or somebody else in my life needs help. So, let's start with you.
Okay, good times. So yeah, I'll touch on the addiction topic, because growing up, I started drinking very young, smoking and doing drugs very young. I think I was about 12. Used to go to my friend's house after school, drink tequila, get trashed. Started smoking weed at like 12, started smoking cigarettes. And that was kind of like my way to cope. Like, I didn't really have my mom around. She was always working. My dad wasn't around, so I kind of didn't have any like parental guidance. I didn't have anyone motivating me. And you know, I got pregnant at 16. I was dating older guys, daddy issues, right? He was 5 years older than me, so you know, that was kind of interesting. And he bought me booze, so all my friends always invited me over, because I had a 21-year-old boyfriend in high school, so got more drunk, and I actually was sexually assaulted when I was 13, and I was drinking with older guys and strangers and stuff like that. So yeah, I coped with my problems that I didn't even know about from an early age. I was always drinking, always doing drugs, all of them. Like I would take multiple drugs at a time. I don't know how I didn't die, honestly. I used to take like 4 or 5 different drugs and drink and party and go to raves, and you know, eventually it got kind of old, and I made it a point to like, wow, I have kids, you know, I have responsibilities, like I need to just like fucking stop fucking up. So I quit everything cold turkey and didn't have to go to rehab. I kind of hid it from everybody. My mom had no idea I was having withdrawals and detoxing and hallucinating and crying, and it was just crazy. It was a really, really hard process, but I'm really proud that I made it through that somehow. And so now I still drink sometimes, you know, on the weekends. But
Nerd
you know,
nights after parties.
nerd nights after parties. That's when I'd get crunk. But yeah, it was years of me coping because I didn't know what was wrong with me. Like I was anxious, so I would smoke weed to chill out, and then, or I would get too spazzy because I would smoke sativa, and then I would, you know, it was just like trying to find a way to make myself feel better. And it was, drugs definitely isn't a good way of that. You can really, like, I OD'd a couple times, but I don't know how I didn't die because I would take uppers, downers, and drink like every day for a while. So yeah, hopefully you can find positive people to be around. That's very important. You cannot hang around people that don't do anything with their lives. If your friends are just doing drugs and partying and drinking every day, like they're never gonna go anywhere, and you're never gonna go anywhere because you're hanging out with those kind of people. So it's very important to find someone positive to kind of motivate you, and so you can look up that you want to be like in your life. So try to find positive people.
Somebody positive you can look up to?
You know, I'm hilarious, so. Yeah, follow me, find me, I'm a dork, I'm hilarious, But yeah, just, you know, just try to reach out and don't be ashamed and don't let anyone make you feel like you're wrong. Like we all have something wrong with us and it might not be diagnosed, but just kind of be there for your friends and kind of, yeah, reach out. Sorry, I rambled.
That was awesome. That was perfect. I think the thing I think first most about addiction or just mental health in general is like the tools and skills that we can develop ourselves to help ourselves be in the best position to fight back and to have a chance to deal with defense mechanisms, coping mechanisms, your environment, the things that are most important that we can do that we do have control over. And I think personally for me, I think the first step is your environment in terms of the people around you. You know, having positive people that validate your emotions and your feelings and the things you're going through. To me, that's huge. Family, people say family is everything and it's blood and blah, 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 but if it's toxic and it's abusive and it's not, no, it's not. Fuck that. Get out of it. I'm sorry, it's not. There's a tolerance level at a certain point where it becomes dangerous for your own mental health. And you can't continue to allow yourself to be in that environment if it's destroying you and your brain, There's only so much we can put our brain through before it becomes unhealthy and it becomes the habit that we're used to hearing that and hearing that negative feedback. So in terms of addiction, I can't speak in terms of as a mental health professional, but what I will say about addiction in the classes that I've taken, I think it was important for me to become very compassionate towards people that had addiction issues, because the thing with addiction is that everybody reacts differently to it. In terms of like a good example is just alcohol. She could start drinking at 18 and I can start drinking at 18, but if I don't have that DNA and that bad wiring in my brain that makes me addicted to alcohol, I can quit and stop doing it once I'm over that college phase of getting drunk and crunk with my buddies. But if she has that addiction issue and she has that, see how we can easily stigmatize that environment? And that's the same thing with all the drugs. So it's easy for us to judge people and say, well, maybe you shouldn't have started drinking. Maybe you shouldn't have started, those two people in that same environment can do the exact same thing. And we give the hard time and the hard, stigma to the people that are getting addicted to it when we don't consider that sometimes they really don't have a choice. They were in that same option, they took a drink just like the other person, but their body just didn't have the right way of coping with it and getting out of it. So in terms of addiction, I think for me it helps to be compassionate about it and setting up, the right type of habits, the best way you can do, which is create the environment, your diet, your exercise, all those things. And I don't want to talk too much about it because I could probably go on and on about it, but I think it kind of gives you just a little bit of And I think you can talk a little bit more.
I can talk about so many things.
How much time do we have?
Yeah.
Right, let's do it.
I want to touch on a little bit on the gaslighting topic that got brought up, and also just the intersection of like mental health and like the geek community, like nerdy geeky things specifically. So when I first started like going hardcore into cosplay, Harley Quinn was the character that I really identified the most with, and which is why I choose to cosplay her, because she's very much this really highly intelligent person who wound up in a really bad relationship with a malignant narcissist and just a total psychopath, and dealt with an abusive relationship. You know, that is the quintessential abusive relationship, and something that reading, as I started going deeper into the comics, was when I was in an abusive relationship, and I didn't realize that I was in an abusive relationship because it wasn't physical abuse, it was emotional and verbal abuse, and a lot of times we totally discount that, and we don't even see how, you know, somebody's words can be just as damaging, if not more damaging, than physical abuse. And I was reading this Harley Quinn comic where, you know, she's dealing with the Joker and he's buttering her up because he wants her to do something for him. And then, you know, she does it for him, but she does it even, she winds up like capturing Batman, and that wasn't part of the plan. And the reality was that in many ways Harley Quinn is smarter than the Joker, because she's a doctor, right? She's super intelligent. And the Joker was so angry because he felt emasculated by the fact that she accomplished something on her first try that he's constantly kind of struggled with. And he like smacked the shit out of her and like threw her out of a window. So he would build her up until the point where, you know, she was like feeling confident in herself, and then he would tear her down. And it made me realize it was a mirror of my own relationship that I was in, and the partner that I had. When we were in public, he would build me up, he would, you know, show me off and then be proud of me. But when we were in private, he would tear me down. He would gaslight me constantly and make me feel stupid. Like, he would say things to me to make me feel stupid. And this is before I even knew I was autistic, and the way that was manifesting in the relationship as well. And also just being like Latina, and something that, to touch on what you had said, is like POC folks, people of color, like we don't talk about mental health issues. It's totally right. And especially like in my family, so many things happened in my family that never got talked about between like, you know, traumatic experiences, et cetera, et cetera. So there wasn't even like a format for me to go to anyone in my family or even my own mom to discuss. And I saw this pattern repeating, because the same thing that my partner had done to me, the same thing that Joker was doing to Harley, is the same thing that my father would do to me growing up. And because my parents were divorced, and I was actually conceived through sexual assault, and my mom was forced to marry my father. It's like a whole religious thing. And so it took reading a comic book to realize, oh shit, this is my life, you know? And then it also took a comic book going further and reading into like the New 52, where she finally leaves the Joker. She empowers herself to get out of that relationship, to reclaim her life, to rebuild her life, to have a healthy relationship with Poison Ivy and Mason. She's a bisexual woman in a polyamorous relationship, and seeing something that I wanted in my own life, because my partner also did not allow me to live in my sexuality. He didn't allow for me to fully express that part of myself. And seeing her do that, I was like, well, fuck, if Harley Quinn can do it, if Harley Quinn can be a survivor, you know, go from being a victim of abuse to being a survivor and reclaiming her life, and going from being a sidekick villain to an anti-hero to now she's kind of a hero. She's like fighting alongside with Batman. And that was the journey that I wound up and empowered me to get out of that toxic relationship and to reclaim my life, to rebuild. I had to rebuild from scratch because that relationship left me financially broke. I was almost homeless. I had to return to working in, I was a sex worker for a while to like be able to get back on my feet and then deal with everything that comes with that. And from that place, Harley Quinn is a character that I don't necessarily do anymore because now I've transitioned into Wonder Woman because I decided I was ready to leave her in the past because to me Harley Quinn represents the woman of my past, a woman who's defined by the trauma that she experienced, and I decided I no longer want to be a woman that is defined by the trauma that she experienced. I want to be a woman that is defined by herself and that is choosing who she is. And for me, that was Wonder Woman, and it made sense to make that transition because Harley Quinn loves Wonder Woman. She has a huge girl crush on her, and it just made sense for me of like if there was ever an evolution for me to go through as a cosplayer from Harley, it was Wonder Woman, and learning about this character and the way that she uses compassion and love and empathy and forgiveness, and how that helped me to grow as a person, to also empathize and forgive myself for allowing the things to happen to me that were kind of beyond my control. So it's amazing how comics can be therapy. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Do you want to go ahead and talk about being a vegan and how it's good?
Okay, so everybody, you need to just eat vegetables and fruit nonstop. That's the solution to your mental health. All right, here's what you're gonna do tomorrow morning. You're gonna wake up, you're gonna do 10 sun salutations and say namaste at the end of it. I want you all to have a giant kale shake. And then afterwards, you need to find someplace, force yourself, even if it's like an hour drive, just secluded in nature, walk around, meditate,
But wait,
poems.
That's actually really good.
that's not necessarily working for you all the time. So maybe you just have like a steak, don't take a drive, hang out.
That's true, actually. That's what I was
Great
saying.
idea. Hiking is absolutely one
No,
of the
hiking is great,
for
actually.
your brain.
I love hiking.
Seriously,
That's
though,
a great one.
do you want to talk a little bit about?
With gaslighting, I can briefly go into addictions, the one I definitely talk about. With gaslighting, for me, I never realized that I had been in a relationship where that happened to me until somebody finally gave me the meaning of the word. I was like, oh, I've had that happen to me, but it wasn't physical abuse, and you hear a lot of people talk about verbally abusive relationships and how they can damage people, and I always kind of sat there, I was like, because my mother was physically abused, so I've seen that, I was like, I don't know, I've seen my mom actually have hands on her, like, that's hard to watch, but going through mental abuse myself, I sat there and I was like, holy fuck, this leaves scars deeper than the stuff that's skin deep. For me, it's hard to get into a lot of it because it's like a 2-year-old relationship and it still feels really fresh, but I'm open about my mental health, especially when it comes to being in a relationship, because it's good to have that dynamic, understand where you come from, that sort of thing. And she understood I was bipolar. She knew that I would have highs and lows, and she would take advantage of a lot of the shifting moods. When I was in the higher mood set, I am a very energetic, very happy, very outgoing person, very giving. Even like, I like to buy stuff for friends. In the case of a girlfriend, I'll buy her a gift, things like that. She took advantage of that to the most, and when I would be at my lowest, that would be the time where she would break me down. When I was high up, really confident, really happy, everything would be good. But then anytime I'd be depressed, I'd be like, hey, I'm having a rough day today, I just need somebody's shoulder to cry on, like, can I talk to you? She's like, hey, I'm not here to be anybody's crutch, I'm not your responsibility, I'm not your parent. Just, it got into worse stuff that it's still hard to bring up, but to make the long story short, it leaves its scars. When you try and go into other relationships, you definitely have a lot more harder insecurities to deal with, and in my case, she played a lot with my mindset. I was like, oh, well, maybe you were having a manic episode, and that's why you thought this thing was that, and that thing was that. So for me, it's hard whenever I feel like my frame of mind is off. I'm very scared to talk to potential dates, to potential relationships. I'm like, what if I say this, and I'm actually saying something really wrong? Like, I have to have other people catch me. Like, sometimes it's the cheesy thing you do. You text a girl, like, hey, read this for me. Like, for me, I'm just like, hey, can you read this for me? So I make sure I phrase this properly, and I'm not saying anything dumb, and I'm not doing like, that's how bad it gets for me to overthink every conversation like that. But that's been my experience with gaslighting. It's rough, and it's still hard to get really in depth with that relationship. But moving on to addiction, that's the one I just really want to talk about because I've experienced it a little bit firsthand with myself. It's never gotten into any severe drugs. It pretty much stayed with alcohol and weed, which I'm grateful for, and coffee. As crazy as it sounds, caffeine. You can get really hooked to that stuff. It's crazy, but I witnessed my dad dealing with it firsthand, and part of the reason why he was bipolar, same thing, manic highs, way lows, and he got into a lot worse stuff. He was doing cocaine at one point in time. He tried heroin. He was smoking every day. He would take Vicodin, things like that. Like, my dad was crazy. It was rough, and seeing that firsthand was just hard. I was like, damn, addiction's scary. And I was one of those straight edge kids for a long time. Throughout high school, people were like, hey, Chris, do you want to get high? I'm like, no, that's stupid. I don't want to shoot myself in the face with a shotgun doing commercials and all that. Like, I was so anti-drug. I was really all about that. I didn't want to drink much, but eventually as I got older, I started to be more open-minded and stuff, and I got involved in things. I was hanging out with friends that were drinking a bit. I was smoking. And Rui brought up a good example. When you have a good mindset, it's very easy for you to put those kind of things down. And with somebody that's bipolar, when you're in your level mood, it's really easy for me to, hey, I'm going to have one drink with a friend. Hey, I'm going to smoke a joint with a friend. It's no big deal. And you move on with your life. But when you're manic, you're very impulsive. Drinking coffee really heavily, like this is as crazy as it sounds. I have a giant cup in the morning. 2 hours later, I'd have another cup. Another 3-4 hours pass, I'll have another one. It's like 5-6 o'clock in the evening. I drink another one. I get home like, hey, I can't sleep. That's weird. Like, it stems like that, and then because you're so impulsive, like one drink turns to 2 drinks. You'll go to a party, and normally you can shut your friends down, like, shots. You're like, no, I'm good. Like, no, you will take all of those shots. Your impulsivity is out the window when you're manic, and it brings the dangers of becoming addicted to anything very easily. Like, I've never had to deal with it firsthand, but I had a friend who was bipolar, and it was rough. Like, she would have to lock her credit cards away. She would have to hide her phone and not be able to access the internet because she would go on spending sprees. She would get involved with the wrong people. Like, she would find weird hookups and things like that. Like, she literally had to have all of her things just locked away because when impulsivity is there, that's when the addiction starts to happen. And for me, the reason why it hits home really hard, like, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Mac Miller, the artist. He passed away recently, yeah, and a lot of people are laughing, like, oh, it's just another rapper dead to drugs, alcohol, and this thing. But the thing is, like, if you take time to listen to his music, and if you take time to listen to anybody it can be a regular person, but a lot of us deal with artists and music, and it goes hand in hand. It's a horrible stereotype. Like, a lot of these artists are dealing with really deep emotional traumas. Like, you'll hear it in their lyrics sometimes. You'll see it in Mac Miller's last album was hard for me to listen to. It put me into a bit of a depression for a week just because he talks about a lot of things. Like, one of the best songs he had where he's just like, I'm completely cool on the outside, but inside I'm just, like, I look like completely fine. Like, right now, I'm looking good, and I'm good today. But a great example would be internally, I'm freaking out. Like, that's a big thing with me. I have days where externally all my friends are like, you're doing great, you're doing cool, but internally I'm screaming. I'm freaking out, and he has a lot of those types of themes and stuff. He ended up dying of an overdose, and to listen to him talk about his struggles, how he was feeling internally, how, you know, a lot of us have this vision where we feel like, especially because we're creative, if we get success, if we get money, if we make it, that's it. That's our door to feeling happy. Our mental problems are just going to go away, are going to disappear. But the more money you have, the more you can spend on vices, the more you can get hooked into bad habits, the more your impulsivity drives, and the more you can become addicted. And he mentions it in the song, and lots of people will tell you this: money does not buy you happiness. Money can make you feel lower than the lowest. People will only look at you for that, and it's hard. It's really hard to just. I'm going all over the place with this because it's just a touchy subject, but he was tortured, dealing with a lot of stuff, died, and you know, it's been a year since Chester of Lincoln Park passed away, and it wasn't addiction, but it was suicide. And it's just hard for me as a creative seeing all these people dying of addiction, dying of suicide, because sometimes it feels like it's romanticized. Like, oh man, all these great artists were just addicts to things, and a lot of these people, like, look at people, wow, these bands aren't as great because they're not on drugs anymore. Their music doesn't sound good. They're just not the same people anymore. And I feel like we enable people sometimes. We're encouraging that type of behavior, especially in the industry where it's like sex, drugs, and rock and roll, you know? And I don't know, my biggest thing is the order to stop addiction is just we gotta stop glorifying it first and foremost. But it's hard.
Now that everybody's deeply sad.
I actually wanted to add something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just specifically gaslighting, I think it's important. We kind of were giving a little bit of education on it, but I think it's also important, like the insidious nature of it and how it works its way into you because you don't see it, you don't know it's happening. So it's not an intellectual thing. It's not a matter of you don't know and you're not smart enough and you're totally being taken advantage of. It's very slow process. And he brought up one thing that I think happened to me when I was younger, and that's if you have a compassionate nature, if you have a nature of giving, and you get more reward in your brain from giving, it's very easy to get lost in that and making that person happy and making that person loved, and that you just keep giving because it makes you feel good. But it's all about balance. You can't just give. You can't, even though that feels good to you, because you are creating a habit in that relationship to make them used to that. And even if they're not gaslighting you, they may unintentionally start to be manipulative or even feel like, hey, now you're not giving me as much because you want me to give you more. I don't know about that, And that's the habit, the dangerous habit in it where it's insidious, and that you're like slowly developing this habit of like, give. Now I'm not trying to shame the person and say, oh, it's your fault, but I'm saying that's one example of how complex and how complicated it can get a relationship where you think gaslighting is something that would be straight, cut, and dry like the Joker and Harley, when it's not. It's very slow, and it starts with a lot of love and a lot of, I love you, and you're amazing. And
The love
right?
bombing.
Yeah, it's just love, and then right when they have you, if it's malicious, once they have you, then they're gonna start to break you down. Now, if it's done, like I said, in a way where it isn't done intentionally and it's unintentional, it can very much just be the reward system of the brain, and that you made it an 80-20 relationship or a 90-10 relationship, and you decided to change the terms because now you want to go and follow your path and your passion. You want them to support you, and they're like, that's not how this thing got set up for 2 years. I'm not used to it. I don't know what to do. And so always try to have balance in that relationship. 60-40, even if you love to give, you also have to be responsible with your own mental health and be a little selfish sometimes. So I just wanted to say that as a way of as a tool, as a habit, as a way to kind of be mindful of your own self and the things that you can do to avoid getting into gaslighting.
Set boundaries in your relationships. Because I don't know about all of you, but growing up in Latino culture, I was raised that if your partner isn't jealous, then they don't really love you. Or there's no such things as boundaries in a relationship. When you love somebody, you let them do whatever they want with you, and you're supposed to do whatever they ask, and et cetera, et cetera. And I think that it's something also to acknowledge culturally that a lot of times toxic behaviors become normalized in certain cultures and perpetuated in certain cultures, and then you don't even realize that you're allowing toxic behaviors to persist in your relationships because you were raised that that's normal and that's okay when it's really not. And it's why I had a lot of issues in my relationships because I had no boundaries, and I let my partners get away with a lot of really terrible things because I was taught that that was totally fine, and it's not. So you can't be afraid to say no. You can't be afraid to take care of yourself and disengage and walk away. And if that partner, I would literally, my partner would start arguments with me, and I would be like, listen, I understand that you're upset about this right now, but I think that we need to table this conversation because we're talking in circles, and let's maybe come back to this at another time. Well, you don't get to decide when the conversation ends, and I want to keep, and they would literally chase me around the house. But then if I was upset about something, it was like, I'm done talking about this, and they would walk away from me. So they wouldn't allow me to disengage when they wanted to keep arguing with me, but then if I wasn't being heard and I needed to be heard, I needed to vocalize my feelings, they would be like, fuck it, I'm out, and they wouldn't hear me, so it's also something to keep an eye out for is reciprocity in your relationships, and emotional intelligence is something that now I demand. And I have a whole pillar system, and I encourage you to develop your own pillar system of what are the kind of behaviors that you are willing and not willing to tolerate in a relationship, and just come out the gate with it and be like, this is who I am and this is what I need. Could you ride?
So if anybody has questions, comments, feel, yeah.
I just wanted to get some feedback on the stigma surrounding speaking out about mental health. And I mean, it's awesome you guys are here talking about it. It's huge. But have you ever experienced somebody either directly saying it to you that, I know you mentioned your family, which is totally fucked up.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, especially the people that love you, when they say that it's not real, that's hard to deal with. I had a friend her wife, or her husband literally said, what you're experiencing is not real. Like, she's like curled up in a ball.
That's gaslighting.
Yeah.
I had my ex say that too.
And and he also said that it's not professional to announce publicly that you suffer from depression or mental health issues. So, have you ever experienced this from somebody directly or somebody else?
I think what he's saying, there's like a bunch of things there, but I think the thing.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
My
No.
three questions are all-
No, they're great. They're great. I just think it's important to also be careful not to verbally voice your mental health if you're not in a safe place and not ready to do it. So in one respect, yes, good that you talk about it and you share it, but when you're ready and when you're in a safe place.
Yeah.
Because it is very dangerous to do if you're surrounded by people that are going to just immediately. Once it has these beliefs and the way that it's raised or the way that the environment has taught it, and it knows what it knows, and that's what it knows, and it doesn't matter what chart or awesome graphs you brought it. I don't care, this doesn't exist, what you're telling me. And so I think it's a slow process, but I think little by little, in terms of education, you bring that stuff when the person's not angry, when the person's not upset, because once somebody gets angry, they're out. Anytime you're having any kind of discussion, she brought that up, that's huge. If you're ever talking to somebody and they start getting angry on you, no one's going to win. I'll tell you right now, because the brain goes literally to the lowest part of it. It doesn't rationalize, all it wants to do is win. So, a good tip with that is, if you're having a discussion, to try to educate and try to make sure that you're in a good space with them, and it's a good conversation and it doesn't get heated, because once it gets heated, there's nothing good can come from it. The brain just doesn't work after that. I always, whenever I get mad or whenever somebody gets mad when I'm talking to them, I just shut down, because I know that my brain, my frontal lobe just turned off, my cognitive, the main part that's doing the executive function just went, I'm going to work with the worst part of your brain now.
Yeah, I'll comment on the speaking publicly, because I do it so frequently, and I'm lucky to have Nerdbot now as a platform. But there are people that will push back, and not necessarily people close to me, but say Nerdbot will share an article. It's like, just be happy or something.
Just calm down.
Yeah, just calm down, just smile.
Hey Kurt, have you tried smiling today? Have you tried to just not be anxious?
Just don't be anxious.
I just have resting bitch face. I can't do it.
Have you tried not being crazy?
That's a good one too, but I don't know if that works. But I know for me, one positive thing about the more I share, the more people will come forward and say, thank you. Not that I'm saving anybody's life, but they'll say, thank you, you have similar issues to me, and I'm not afraid to tell people. So that's always a good thing that people will, and the more people that share, the more it becomes less of a stigma, I think.
Yeah, I feel that's very important, is to try to eradicate the stigma, because the only reason that mental health isn't being treated as much, or people don't realize that they have a problem, is because it doesn't get talked about, or it gets discredited, like, oh, nothing's wrong, So, definitely talk about it more, because, it was years before I felt comfortable even mentioning it to even people close to me that I was struggling and going through stuff. And now I talk about it all the time. It's kind of like therapy. It's self-therapeutic when you can talk about something that is uncomfortable or isn't really talked about, and you get it out.
How do you know it's not like just your time of the month? You're a woman.
I'm constantly on the time of the month, man. Like a constant PMS. like my kids are like, yeah.
This person here, sorry, I think you have a question?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I kind of think it's a shame how it's swept under the rug. And what you said was well, moving back a little bit. I used to work at one of the local theme parks in the area, not saying which one.
The local theme park, that's a group.
And management kept saying, just smile. And they swept it under the rug. They said, oh, we care about our, insert euphemism for employee.
Yes, I love it.
And their health and well-being. But with our messed up healthcare system, I was trapped in that job.
Exactly.
Because if I left the job and I wanted to leave, there goes my health insurance.
Exactly.
It was kind of, in a weird way, a toxic relationship.
Yeah, okay, absolutely, that's a relationship. I think with mental health awareness, it's important to understand that not one person in here is normal, and nobody in here has a perfect brain that functions perfectly. And I think we're all just we're on the spectrum of some sort of mental health, and some of us just have a brain that operates a little more to the environment that they're given better. Maybe their environment's a little bit better, but there's so many complexities to it. It's kind of ridiculous, the idea that people think that it doesn't exist, or that the matter of the fact that it's not something that everyone deals with when we all do. It's just, like I said, some of us have the physiological, the biological, the sociological, the environment. There's like so many factors to consider when you think about your mental health and how it could be beating you up. And that's why I say, falling back to what you're eating, because that does absolutely affect your brain and your body. Getting aerobic exercise, any kind of thing that gets your heart rate up, that's extremely important. Movement. I mean, when I was going through my depression, just getting out of the bed and going was how I survived that whole process where I just wanted to die. And I did that because of a conversation that I had with my brother years before, that he said, one day you're going to be in that bed and you're not going to want to get out of that bed. You're going to have a real reason not to get out of the bed. And he's like, I want you to just get up, and I promise you it'll get better. And I don't know why I thought about that, and that got me going. And so activity is important, getting movement and going. And then your environment, that's huge. These are controllable factors. These are things that you can control. You have to eat better, you have to move, and you have to surround yourself in an environment that's positive and validates your feelings and your emotions and passionate, passion and art. Like, this environment right here is perfect.
I just really quick want to go back to the sharing one last time. With the sharing thing, this is really important for me. I would not have gotten a proper diagnosis with my mental illness if I did not overshare my shit. It literally, I just had a rough patch one year. It was like 2 months in where my Facebook statuses were like, hey, life's beautiful, hey, everything sucks, back and forth. And I had a friend message me, and he just says, like, please don't be offended. I actually am genuinely worried about you, but I see your statuses. I talk to you on the weekends, on the phone, and everything, and your life is constantly, you're either really happy and life is beautiful, or you're literally down in the dumps and you think everything sucks. And he goes, I have a feeling you might be bipolar. He's like, you've been battling things for years, depression, you think it's anxiety, you tried everything, like, go find out if it's bipolar. I went to my therapist and was like, hey, is there a possibility I'm bipolar? I mentioned all my symptoms, I was really open and honest with everything, and at that point she's like, that's what it is. That's why you struggled in order to get help. So find the right environment, find the right people, and figure out the right time, but talk about it, open up about it, and be with the right person. Be brutally honest, because that's the only way you'll ever get a for sure diagnosis. Because anxiety and depression suck because there's so many mental illnesses they tie in with. When I'm manic, I feel anxiety all the time. Even if I'm happy, I feel that jittery feeling. When I'm in my depressive state, it's depression. So being open and honest about everything can help people get you the right sort of help right there. But where's the question?
Yeah.
I have two really specific questions. So one is, how often do you guys cry?
Oh, every day.
Like 4 times last week.
I
When I watch
literally,
Infinity.
at some point of the day.
A lot. And what's your second question?
Or puppies die
That
in the
makes me
movie.
feel a lot better.
Yeah, every day.
And two is, if you're having a discussion with someone and one of you starts to get angry, what do you do? your brain just shuts down.
You know, it absolutely
What
does.
do you do? Like, do you push through, or?
Okay, are you talking about from the perspective of I'm the one that's angry, or they're the one that's angry, or both?
Yeah,
Both?
yeah.
Okay, so I think the first part is of self-awareness. You know, now that I've told you this, try to remind yourself of that you're no longer thinking right, and you're gonna say some really dumb stuff and hurtful stuff because your brain is not working here. It's working in the amygdala, the very small, like the part of the brain that developed first. So you're not gonna think right. You're not gonna think rationally. You're just gonna think, I gotta win this conversation now. F you, you're wrong, and then you start sounding ridiculous. And I think that's the first part, which is the self-awareness, and to take a step back and go, okay, damn it, I lost. I'm fucking angry. I lost. You lost. I'm sorry, but when you get angry, you lost. Whatever the topic is, you're done. Back it up. Admit defeat to yourself, not to them, but to yourself, and try to dial it down, little by little. Breathe. Do what you need to do. Walk away. Also, have that conversation when you don't get angry. If you're in a relationship and you guys get angry, talk about that. Say that to them first. Say, hey, you know what? Whenever we get angry at each other and we start yelling things, can we just have a thing where maybe we just step away and just go walk the dog, go do something to help? The last thing I want to say just about food, I know I keep talking about food, and I think it's important that I have a reason why I say that. There is scientific evidence that shows that high levels of sugar do cause depression. So it's keeping your body in a constant inflammation. Inflammation is bad for your body, and it keeps your body in that status. That's why when we take in a lot of sugar, we're really literally constantly keeping our body inflamed. And that's like the worst thing you can do for up here and for everything.
vouch for Ruby. I've studied nutrition. Everything you put in your body has a really hard effect on you.
I notice it when I'm like down. I do the opposite. Instead of staying away from the sweets, I go to the sweets and I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? This is gonna make it worse.
None of this can be true because ice cream makes me happy.
Okay, that's the reward system of your brain fighting back. That's what that is. He's right. There's a level of it, so don't quit ice cream. If you get that little drug that says, damn,
I'm a donut
this is
person
good.
myself.
You can cheat. That's the cheat. That's helpful. Eat your ice cream.
Can I hop in about the second part of that one?
Absolutely.
So when you're asking as far as like the other person being angry, the best thing you can do is try to diffuse or de-escalate. I laugh because I know these things. I had to work at a mental hospital, ironically, for a while, and so the best thing to do is either try to distract that person from whatever the topic is that, like, just kind of throw a curveball, like randomly, just
Start
don't.
dancing.
Yeah, just literally. That's what I hear. it's
No,
random.
no.
But
Yeah, you're
But
right.
no, you have to de-escalate the situation. So either you can stop talking, you can walk away, or you can find something that person, like if you know that person personally, try to just mention something that you know will distract them from their anger. Like something like, oh, you remember? Oh, is there this thing that we have to do? Like you have to like snap them out of that because they're gonna be like trying to figure out that situation. So just change the topic, or walk away, or stop talking because they want to win. They want the last word. And the more you talk and the more that you raise your voice, it's just gonna get worse and worse. So you have to learn how to just de-escalate or remove yourself from the situation. It's probably the
Also, if I can jump in on that, just like as a femme person that has dealt with physical and emotional abuse, you also, the number one thing you need to do is prioritize your safety. That needs to be like the number one thing. And something that we all need to come to terms with is that sometimes no matter what you do or what you say to try to de-escalate a situation or to try to disengage, if somebody has decided, if they are on this train that they just want to be violent to you in some kind of a way, you need to remove yourself from that situation by any means necessary and prioritize your safety over anything else. And if that means bringing a third person in, or if it means like you said, just walking out and just leaving. And sometimes you have to be even really careful about just leaving, because that would be something I would do with my partner at the time. Was it would get so heated that I would shut down and I would leave, and that would escalate the situation. So you have to just be really mindful of the things that trigger that other person, the things that trigger you, and prioritize your safety above all things.
I'd like to add one more thing to that. Rui mentioned it a lot, and I've actually trained Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for 6 years, and a big quote they always used to like to throw at us was, I think it's Bruce Lee, like, anger will make a fool of us all, but when you're out there training,
you have a very flow mindset. Your brain is very centered. Whatever you're trying to work on, you're doing well. When anger gets incorporated, all of this technical stuff shuts down. Like I said, you go back into the back end. I love it when my training partners are angry because they're reckless and it's easy for me to catch them, but when it comes to a real life scenario, that's pretty much how I approach it. I read their body. I see their posture. I see how they're coming at their eyes, their sort of thing, and just get a feel for them. If you can tell they're coming at you very aggressively, just be like, hey, what's going on? What do you want to talk about? Be gentle about it. And if you can tell it's something that's really bothering them, if they're really in your face about it, try and convince them, like, hey, let's do this another time. Try and talk it down gently, that sort of thing, because you never want to deal with an angry person. No matter what you do, even if logically you're 100% right, they're going to try and make it seem like they're the one that's right in the end. And like she mentioned, if you can walk away from the situation, make sure it's a safe deal where you can walk away and it won't escalate the situation anymore. Like, I have like people that I've dealt with over time. Some people I know, they're very verbal, so if I'm like, hey, I'm walking away from the situation, they'll keep talking to me. So it's just a matter, I have the patience. It's hard for some people, but I'll sit there and I'll nod with them, I'll talk it down, I'll keep going until they run out of their steam. I'll be, all right, I get where you're coming from, I understand it, you know what, you've calmed down, give me a little bit of time, let's process, and I'll go back to the conversation that way. And that's how I personally deal with it. It all depends on the person. As for me being the angry one, when I'm angry, I don't like to talk to people. If somebody's like, hey, I gotta have a serious conversation with you, I still have it in my ability most days. I'm like, listen, I am not in a good mind frame right now. I don't want to say anything stupid. I don't want to offend you. I don't want to do anything dumb for me. So how about we have this conversation at a later time, another day, just to sort of make it good. Some people don't have that sense, in a sense, when they're angry. So the best thing I can try and tell you is take a deep breath, count to 10, do what you can to center yourself back down, and then determine from there if you're really in a state of mind to speak to that person or you still need more time.
So unfortunately, we kind of have to wrap up here, but before I wrap up, let me just say that I think everybody's on this panel because they're willing to share and most importantly, I guess, listen. So if anybody's having issues, you can find us.
Absolutely find
All of us. Yeah. So I'll start, but I'll go down the row, and I'm going to give you my contact info, and then I'm going to try to end on a positive note. So I'll think
Can I have your number, Kurt?
You already have my number.
It's crazy, I just met you.
Exactly. I want to end on a positive note, so first I will say something that always makes me happy. My dogs. So whenever I'm having an issue, I spend time with my dogs. It's always a good time. You can find me at Kurt Bros. You can find me at Nerdbot. You can find me at WLFK Films on Instagram. But usually, if you just a Nerdbot event, look at the Nerdbot page. I'm always around. So, what makes you happy? Where can we find you?
What makes me happy? I love listening to music. When I'm upset, I literally blast like Panic at the Disco or like something fun and exciting, something upbeat, Post Malone. You know, I blast some stuff and dance around in my living room with my kids and just rock out, especially when my neighbors are annoying. But you can find me on Instagram at Puma Does Cosplay, and you'll see my fun cosplays. You'll see my dorky nerdy side. You'll see me out of cosplay. And yeah, just feel free to reach out to me any time of the day. I'm usually don't sleep ever, so if it's late, be like, hey, I have a question for you, and I'll answer it right away because I really like being there for people, and I'm an empath, and yeah, I know how important it is to have somebody. So find me.
Geek Strong. I think that's like on Instagram and the Geek Strong on Twitter and Facebook, but I respond typically pretty quickly on the DMs, especially if they're mental health related, on Instagram at Geek Strong. And fun stuff I like to do, I think dancing is always a good thing, always. And creating, just passionate stuff that I when I'm doing stuff for other people. Anytime I'm doing anything for someone else and it makes them happy, that's an instant way to cheer myself up.
You can find me on Instagram. It's the Michelle LaBelle, or you can go on Facebook and just look up Michelle LaBelle. I have a Facebook page there. You're more than welcome to contact me in either place for whatever. You just need some support and things that make me happy. Cute, fluffy things that I can snuggle. I love snuggling the things. It's my favorite. I will admit to cute aggression though. Yeah, I see you in the back with your stuffy over there. And then also something that is very therapeutic for me is I write poetry and short stories and journaling. It's a really great way to take everything that's in my mind and to externalize it and take that from the space of my mind and put it somewhere outside where I can actually like look at it. And once I do that, and I can reread what I wrote, and I can almost kind of give advice to myself as like a third person and be like, oh, this is why I'm feeling this way, or you know, it helps. It can be very cathartic and very therapeutic just to put your feelings on paper and then do what you want with it. You can publish it. I have a Figment page, or you can, you know, burn it safely, light it on fire, and you know, that could be a way that you know, therapy on yourself.
Not inside the building, please.
Not inside the building.
Is it my turn?
No,
Is there something that makes me happy?
You don't get to go.
Okay,
I
bye.
don't want to hear about vegan
What
donuts.
makes me happy is not letting vegan Spider-Man talk, so.
I mean, if that's your thing, no, what makes me happy? Anime titties. No, I'm kidding.
I mean, that's legit.
No, what makes me
No
happy is,
shaming here.
what really
Same
makes
thing.
me happy is being creative and being around my friends. Like, great example. I just met you, but you're a wonderful human being. I've known these three people in this panel for a while now, and being around people like this, oh, that was great. Being around people like this really brings me up. It keeps me happy. I know it sounds crazy, but it literally makes me forget my problems, my day-to-day sorrows, the things that are bothering me, that sort of thing. And being creative. I cannot go a day without being creative. If I'm writing, if I'm posting something on Instagram and taking time with the caption, if I'm creating a video, anything of that nature, music, whatever, that makes me really happy, including cosplay. Cosplay is the biggest one. And where can you guys?
It might be vegan
It
Spider-Man.
might be not vegan Spider. No, you can find me as vegan Spidey on everything: Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all that stuff, and Twitch. Follow me on Twitch. And then if you want to message me for any sort of mental health things, Instagram. Hands down, the best place to reach me. Just slide in the DMs, be like, hey, I would like to talk to you.
Dick
Someone's
pics.
bugging me, and
Send
please
him
no,
Bob and
please
Regine.
no unsolicited Bob, Regine, or dick pics. All right.
Thank you guys. I have a mission. Everybody who leaves here, you have homework. Please just tell somebody that you appreciate them.
Give him a hug.
That's really hard, dude.
Thank you.